Oh, Justin got caught. Well, everybody, today is Wednesday, April 26, 2022. And today it is Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios, and I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works. And we're both here representing the Embroidery Nerd. And we will be working with Chroma software today. So I don't think you've used it before, ever. So he looks super excited to be exploring a new software that he's never used on a piece of art that he literally just got 4 minutes ago. We're not making it difficult at all for him, period. Nope, not difficult at all. But do you have that pulled up yet, Justin?
Yes, I do.
All right. So I'm going to grab a couple of comments here. We have Barb watching from North Central Minnesota. We have Cindy King from Texas. Hello. We have Jamil from Wisconsin. Hello. And who makes Chroma? That is the Chroma software that they, I want to say they bundle a version of it with their machines. And then they have their upgraded versions that you can purchase in an additional fee. But that would be who makes the I try to say it, Chroma software, and it doesn't roll off the tongue as well as I'd like to. But Cindy has noticed, as did I when I first popped in, that Justin has a new shirt on. So exciting news for all of those that have that ordered their shirts through the Embroidery Nerd. I believe those are going to be shipping tomorrow.
Yes, we finished printing them up today. We'll be shipping tomorrow.
Awesome. So we can all be super excited for those to come. If you missed out on getting in on the shirt order, I'm very sorry, but we're not going to do another shirt run for at least a year. We like to space mount once a year, and we do a different design every year. So heads up, don't miss it next time. But I'm going to go ahead and start clicking on all the buttons that make things happen. So we'll share screen. Oh, I have to push buttons. Screen 1. Yep. There we go. And so Cindy asks, so would you only use it on the Chroma machines? Sorry on the spelling. No, that's okay. So this software actually, and I'm going to just pull it up here right there. So this software, let me move that and that. It can save to a lot of different file formats. So you can export to, and I don't have that up, but you can export to most of the major formats, DST. I know it does PES. I'm trying to think of the other ones that it does offhand.
So you got to remember, every software is going to have its native software format, its native language. And so, WorldCom's got the EMB files. Wings has the old Wings has MLS, or the newer one has NGS. Pulse is PXF. Velcro is what, OFM?
Or OMF, I can't remember.
Okay.
But yeah.
I think, yeah. So those native files are specific to the software. So those only can be opened and used in that particular software. But then there's the machine. What's that?
I'm going to jump in here and say Chroma's native format is .rde.
RDE?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yep.
So yeah, so when you see those specific files, a lot of times when I'm getting new customers and they have Chroma, and they think, well, I have Chroma, so I need an RDE file. Unfortunately, because I don't use that software, I can't supply that file. But if they're not trying to digitize or really get into some major editing from my original file, they don't need the native file. Whatever their software can read and or their machines can read is pretty much what they need from me. And rely on your digitizer to go back to their native file to make changes if there's ever needed a change to be done.
Yep. I agree. So almost every software out there that I'm aware of, it will export to a DST file. I am not aware of a single software out there that won't throw out a DST file, because I think it's the most widely used, and it was used 100 years ago, right after paper tapes were gotten rid of. For, I don't know, cassette tapes. But it every software I've ever used has that. I know a lot of them have a separate, I think it's TSB for Tajima. But they all export to the DST files. So I'm going to grab a couple of comments here. We have Dustin joining us. Hello. We have Letty. Hey, Letty, how's it going? And Rebel says, I thought Chroma was built off the Pulse framework. I know Chroma software is, and I got it. I'm going to try and get that every time just to roll off the tongue. I know it is developed by, I believe it's AGS, Active Graphics Solutions, in somewhere. They make a few different softwares, but this is the version that they have that Chroma uses and supports. So we're going to wait for Justin to go ahead and pull the art up on his screen. We'll see how long that takes.
I have mine up.
You have yours up? Okay.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, I don't remember Mother's Day. I always forget the date, but my mom was born on Cinco de Mayo. So I know her birthday is coming up.
Which is what day?
The 5th.
May 5th. Yes.
May 5th. Yeah, I had to make sure I did the month after April, because I was going to say March, but I know that that's wrong. So we've got that. Cindy says, so most would normally get a DST file. I know when I send out files, the majority of them that go out are DST files.
Yeah. I would think that's the most commonly used machine file is a DST file.
Yeah, because not only does the big brands, they all read DST files, but a lot of the smaller brands too. I think even Brothers read DST files.
I think so.
I'm going to call them prosumers, but the 6 and the 10 needle, I think they read DST files. I'm not sure about the flatbed, but DST is kind of a universal format. So
right,
that's generally what I send out, unless if somebody specifies something different. Because I've had that too, where they're like, "Hey, I need a."
Yeah, I'd say 97% of what I put out, if it's not an EMB file, native Wilcom, it's a DST. I think the next one is the most popular, is a PES file that I send out.
Yeah, I know I do TAP files because that's the happy format that retains color information. So that's the one I do, but I still have to set my color stops before I send the design to the machine. If I don't, then I have to set it on the machine, and that would mean I'd have to learn how to use the control panel, and I don't know if I'm going to do that. So Gina says PES seems popular also. I know that that's one that's asked for a lot. Some of the others that you don't see too much are like JEF files for Genome. I think it's XXX for Singer. Don't
yes.
That. VHS for Husqvarna. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, the ZSK has
a zoo file. That's what I call it, a zoo file.
A zoo file, that's right.
Because I think it is Z00Z00. So
yeah.
Letty says, I sometimes ask for a ZSK depending on the design if it's easier to assign threads in the machine. So that's really what it comes down to, is how easy you want to be able to put threads in the machine. So I'm going to go over some of the tools here on the interface, and then I'm going to throw Justin under the bus, but we'll wait on that. You didn't even laugh.
So what size are we doing this so we're on the same page?
Well, of course you would ask that. The size that I'm going to come up over here, one of the cool things that I really like about this is you can right-click on the ruler and change it to inches. That's one of the things I like. Another thing that's pretty interesting about this software is it actually will run natively on a Mac, which there are not very many softwares out there that'll do that. I'm just going to size it to 4 inches.
4 inches? Okay.
Yeah. So That's how we're going to transform it. We come up here, we do that. We don't know why we're doing color adjustment, but I can. Generally, the next thing I'll do is I'll come in and I'll lock it so that we don't accidentally grab it, and it lives there. And then I'll zoom in a bunch of times. We're at 200%. That's not too bad. So we got our node edit, which is generally the same in all the different softwares. Stitch edit. We've got our run tool, our steel, classic satin, complex fill. I like to call this column B. But input satin, we've got applique, cross stitch, and manual input path. And of course, we can put notes on there. So the first thing that I do when I come in is I'm going to come over to the ruler tool. And I like to start measuring stuff, and I do it in millimeters. So we're looking at this A is going to be almost 2 millimeters wide, 2.8. That means that that's going to be probably a millimeter when you're done with it, 1.2. And that's going to have to be jumped up to a millimeter. Boy, that's going to get creative. 3.6. Yeah, 2.0. We could always throw a fancy fill behind it. I know how you like to add like dimension and stuff.
Yes, no flat embroidery here.
No flat embroidery. I mean, that's what I'm here for. So to insert to use the classic satin, we're just gonna go left click, and put in some curve nodes. We'll see if Justin did the suggestions I said before we started.
No, I'm still trying to figure things out here.
So let's go over some of the general options. Since we're here, we're going to go into the general options. And I've got my environment. The default style, the style is actually like, what do they call it? Auto fabric, easy fabric. So that's the settings in there, which let's see if they, yeah, usually when you start, it says normal. I put it to cap. Default thread palette, which is anchor. That doesn't really go too much. Metric. We've got our machine. So activate trim if stitch is longer than 20 millimeters. Split up stitches longer than 8. So that's our stitches, our stitch processor basically. So 0.4. We've got our grid. Digitizing. I like this one right here, Justin. Input curves with right click. So normally you have to use control, but because I come from Willcom and Realcom, you right click on everything to do curve nodes. I like to change that one.
I better change that right now.
I knew that you would. The other big one that I really stress on changing is this one under view, and use left click on palette to apply color. So I really, if you don't do that and you left click on a color, it does that. And then you select one and it doesn't apply it to your object. So I changed that so that it's more what you would expect. So I can grab a couple of objects here and just change them to the color that I want them. So those are the big ones that I like to get. I do change the tools, general options. I do edit the jump stitch right here on 20 millimeters because I am more like a 5 millimeter person. And I did that fast, but I changed it to 5 millimeter. So that means if we go wider than 5 millimeters between objects, then it's going to put in the trim. 20 millimeters is kind of long to have a jump stitch thrown in there, but you know, some people don't like jump stitches.
Nope, some people don't.
So space bar allows you to pan, in case you were wondering, and then when you're looking at the width of this straight, it actually tells you at the bottom left, right above my start window, how wide that stitch is. So it's 2.4 millimeters. And then when you end an object, it asks you to put your start point and your stop point. So that's kind of nice too. Yeah, my mouse is acting like it's Tuesday. So start point, and I start stop point there. And we just can move along the design, and we'll go a little closer to the art there and there, which I think a lot of people, like when they look at stuff like this, they say, let me click on the auto digitize button and we'll be done. So one of the things that I think helps a lot of people is once they learn that pretty much digitizing is tracing. You just have to know how to overlap and underlap certain objects. So I'm going to jump over and grab a couple of comments here. We have Barb saying that she ordered a post bed and do a post bed zigzag and straight stitch industrial. That's awesome. Can't wait for that you to get that. They're a lot of fun. I've got one over my shoulder. Letty says it's a zoo file. Z00. Cindy says I've been trying to practice my digitizing, but I need a few logos to wow my customers. No pressure, Justin. No pressure. We have Suzanne. Hello, Suzanne. Glad you're here. We have Chris. Welcome. And he says, do you guys do this daily? That would be an understatement. We do it almost all the time, I think.
Digitizing or the live?
The live we do once a week. Digitizing.
Yeah. Digitizing is eat, sleep, and drink, pretty much.
Yeah, you'll hit a point that you look at an object and you're like, you know, that would look good with.
Yep.
You just start seeing it everywhere.
I can't like look at retail stuff without picking up a hat if I'm walking by it in a store. And usually it's like, why'd they do that? Or that's not trimmed properly.
Yep. You're constantly looking at it. So Jersey Joe says hello, welcome. And Chris says live. I figured you digitize. Yeah, we go. So we're here on the Embroidery Nerd channel. We go live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and talk about. Well, we often digitize live and go over some of the stitch theory. So Barb says, Cindy, I've been taking digitizing lessons for Wilcom 4.5, slowly getting the hang of it. There's so much to learn. There's a lot on Wilcom that I don't use. There's a lot, and I learn stuff all the time.
And there's so many different, and especially with Wilcom, I know that some of the other not so popular or I guess smaller brands out there, there's maybe only like one or two ways to create a satin. When Wilcom, not only is there many different input levels or different input styles, but then you can get to that menu clicking a side icon, going up to a menu and scrolling through the options, hotkeys. There's so many different ways to get to it.
Yep. So Chris says, I'm learning. I brought my laptop to work practice on some MLB team logos. Jersey says Stitches Life. And there are so many comments. The comments are coming in. So Chris says, I'm also using Chroma. And I believe that Ricoma, I want to say they bundle a version with this with every machine that they sell. And Cindy, I'm a lot like you. I just jump in and hit all the buttons. That's kind of how you learn. You find out that way. And Carrie says, first time viewer, thank you. Well, we're glad to have you with us. So I've digitized an M, Justin. How far did you get?
I'm on the M. I'm just playing with like settings and stuff and start and stop points, trying to get familiar with it.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, settings are up here. I like to change them globally. Usually I do it when I'm done. But I think that's more of a personal thing.
Now, do they have a setting like Wacom where you can grab something and basically say, set these settings as current, so everything after that you're going to digitize is going to be in the same settings?
I have not found that.
Okay. So that would be one good reason to go back and apply all the settings at the end, because if you're digitizing something with basic settings, setting the settings, and going back and forth. It's a lot of back and forth and time
Yeah.
wasted, I think. But
I know if I was doing like Puff, I would get them all right at the beginning. It's just easier that way. But not too far.
One thing off the bat that I see that I'm doing that Wilcom has is you could actually end your stitch with the space bar. That's not working in Chroma.
Well, so in Chroma, when you hold down the space bar, it puts this little hand on the screen so you can pan.
Ew.
And you can even do it like in the middle of digitizing, because see, it doesn't auto pan for you when you
Right.
get to an edge, so you can just hold down the center or the space bar and pan that way. There are a couple of things that I have to get used to when I move from different software to Chroma. So grab some more comments here. Rebel says, just traded my Chroma E for E4.5 yesterday. Good decision. You know, I think that you'll be happy with Wilcom. I think you'd be happy with Chroma, depending on the version that you had. Is the best decision is that once you get a digitizing software, you kind of stick with it, because it's going to be a learning curve. And then once you get past that learning curve, then it turns into I'm just, I guess, learning the different ways to input the stuff rather than learning all the different settings that I want to use. So
speaking from somebody that has 15 different softwares.
Well, yeah. Like you have to do. Don't make me throw popcorn at you. No, when I started, it was the software that I bought that I was told I needed. I couldn't even do a run stitch. I couldn't path anything. It was just straight auto digitizing software. And I outgrew that and moved onto a different software, and outgrew that and moved on to a different software. But you know, it depends really. I think a lot of people, when they start, they buy digitizing software and they buy their machine at the same time. And then they kind of decide later on that, you know what, I'm not really necessarily cut out for digitizing. And so then they move on to something else. So, but Chroma gives you base Chroma with the machine. That's good to know. And is this puff or flat design? When will you all be digitizing puff logos? So this one in particular is I'm doing it as a flat. We could do it as a puff.
I was flat as well.
Yeah.
Puff designs, if you watch, last week.
Yeah, I think we did puff last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
Or the week before.
So digitizing 911.
Yep.
Yeah, so we do puff designs every once in a while. We have a segment called Digitizing 911 where if someone's having a lot of problems with their design, last week's happened to be a 3D puff design that the viewer sent in to us, and we'll digitize puff live. If you haven't seen the webinars that we put out, there's a 3-part series that I teach 3D puff, every aspect of it, how you run it, clean up, digitizing. We have that available on the website as well.
Yep. So this week it didn't happen to be puff. Last week it was. We've done puff 3 or 4 times, I want to say, and then Justin has 3 webinars on it. They're all really good. So, yep, there we go. Checking. I had the you unplugged something sound. We've been having USB port problems. I'm not going to say why, Justin, but you know, I think you broke it.
I broke it.
Yeah. So can you see the comments, Justin?
Yeah, I'm gonna find that link right now.
All right. I am mid-object. There we go. So I'll grab a couple more comments. Sharing, following. Thanks for the info. Absolutely. I have Luxe, just never took to it. You know, some user interfaces are easier than others. I've struggled really a lot with some user interfaces. Some are easier than the others. So we have Barb saying, I have several digitizing and embroidering software. I work mainly in Wilcom, but also use Brilliance with the add-ons from time to time. Yep. I primarily use Wilcom. I would say it's the most widely used between that and Pulse. Those two are probably the two most widely used softwares out there. So
yeah, I would think so.
we have Justin added some links below, and then Rebel says the best $60 spent for the webinars. They were good. They were packed with a lot of information. I was lucky and got to sit through them. The text one's pretty good too. I know everybody talks about the puff all the time, but if you plan on doing a lot of lettering, which is, I would consider all embroidery designs is a lot of lettering.
Pretty much, yes.
So if you plan on doing a lot of lettering, the lettering webinar is pretty good too. Lee's webinars that she did on color blending are they're really good too. I take Lee's classes. I have a subscription to her site, and I attend her classes frequently because she's a wealth of knowledge as well. But I've caught up. There we go. And then, at the end, I would grab all my objects and change the settings. Satin, underlay, edge run, contour, parallel. I'm going to take out the parallel. Do that. We can change our densities here. So I like to go just a little bit denser. Don't make a comment, Justin. I heard it. I heard it. Here's where you can set your tie in and tie off commands. It will go through. And when you do when you're digitizing in the software, when it runs through the stitch filter at the end, it'll start applying lock stitches on and off. I personally like to do it while I'm digitizing so that I know it's going to be there versus I'm hoping the stitch filter catch it. Because if you don't get a tie in when your machine starts to sew, the thread will come out of the needle. And if you don't have a tie out, it's going to get loose and loop and come out undone. So I like to put those in at that time. And of course, you can see I've got my really long jump stitches. And that's start and stop points. So that object's good. That one, the start point needs to come down to there. And then because these are so close, I would actually do that. Hit enter and it'll update. And then we'll go to the next object here. And I'd move that down so it's closest point. Make it a little less visible.
That jump between the A and the Y, how do you add a trim there?
There you go.
You select the second object?
Yeah, you select the second object. I did the wrong one the first time, but you select the second object and you put a trim, which is kind of, to me, it's a little bit confusing because if I want to, if I'm on this object, the M, there, if I'm on that object and I want to trim when that's done, the first thing that pops in my mind is not to select that object until it's trimmed before it. Usually it's trim after. So that's one of the things that kind of gets me. And I know a lot of their users, they'll actually they'll grab objects like this and they'll hit trim. And then it trims on every object. And really, if you're trying to do a design that's going to flow really well, you only want to put trims where you have to. So let me go to commands here, and then this end command, I'm just going to turn it to normal. And that was the wrong one. That one needs to be at a trim. End command, trim, apply. There we go. And then I'll go back an object, and I'm going to take the trim off of that one to normal. Because those, within the letter, they should all run together. Now, you can see here, and let me try and hide the object, that I have this little symbol here, and I have this little symbol here. And these indicate this is the tie-in, and this is the tie out and the trim. So I've got a tie in here, and naturally the tie out doesn't show there, but it's going to happen when it runs through the stitch filter because it's color change. This one as well, it's going to do that there, and everything else is going to be applied when it runs the stitch filter, unless if I go in and I manually change all of the commands.
Now, You said you have to add tie-in and tie-outs then?
I do. I add them just so that I know that they're there, and they're over here under the commands tab. So your start command is usually normal. Your tie-in, you can pick your tie-in, the number of repeats, and the auto. So you can do that. Let me see. Barb asks, can you select all the letters and click the trim? So I've selected all the letters here, and it won't let me hit the trim. But I can come up to the command, and I can tell it end command, trim, apply. And now I've got trims on every object. You can see every one of them. They're all over the place. So you can add trims to every object. I don't necessarily recommend it, but you can. Then after you edit an object, of course, you hit the enter key to update it. So now, I mean, it's looking pretty good. I am zoomed in 500%. The rendering on this, so this is the digital rendering. I can zoom in and the rendering doesn't get any larger. So when I zoom in 1200%, that looks like I'm going to have lots of space in there. But if I go to 100%, that was 10. There's no spaces there. So that's one thing that can kind of get you if you're zooming in a lot, really far in, really far out all the time, is when you turn on the true view, you don't see that kind of that scaled render, and it starts to look a little bit thin. And then you increase your density, and you don't really want to do that. You want to zoom 1:1, and then you look at it and use your density off of that. So I'm going to grab a couple comments here. Chris says, I have a hot 20 burning in my pockets. I can buy that today. Absolutely. And I got Barb's question there. And Cindy says, would that be something that you would set up before you started digitizing the trims? I'd manually as I go. From what I found is with start and end commands and stitch angles, they're better to set as you're going. And it'll be faster if you set them as you're going. The overall settings, underlay, pull compensation, density, those you can set all at once later, and you're not really going to have that much issue. But where I did like a run stitch in here, so I would have to remember I have a run stitch here pathing, and I'd have to go in and I'd have to make sure that I have the tie in. And a lot of that is just a lot easier to do while you're digitizing. So,
hey Jeff, is there a way of travel between elements when you're adjusting start and end points?
Probably.
Like Wacom, you can tab through the elements and it'll run through them sequentially.
Yeah, I know. I'd have to pull up my shortcut, my keyboard shortcuts, and look at it because it's been a little bit since I've been in Chroma. But Rebel asks, what would Justin do? So what would you do, Justin, in this software if you were with trims, tie-ins, tie-outs, if you had to manually digitize all those?
Well, that's what I was asking you. I mean, being a Wacom user, there is a setting that when you're digitizing, you can set it to always tie in after a trim. So that's not something, that's a universal setting that I always have on. So I know that if it's just starting a design or just after a color change or just after a trim, it's always going to tie in. And you can do the settings that it's going to automatically trim if the next one is a certain distance, like you did earlier. You said it's at 5 millimeters. So if it's an object that's 6 millimeters away, I know it's going to trim. You could also set that you're going to lock every time it trims. So that's a universal setting that I always constantly have on. So that's why I was asking you if you actually, in the software, do you actually have to say, no, this element I want it to tie in, this element I want it to tie off?
Right. And I found the document. Dun, dun, dun. So this is a keyboard shortcut document that I created a long time ago when the software actually came out. So viewing shortcuts, object sequence, editing shortcuts, duplicate on group transform, lock, move selected object, creating new design, open, so redraw. So I don't see like the easy tab through. Because I know like here I select the object and I hit tab and it doesn't select the next object.
Right. Yeah. So you can either physically grab the object like you did on your digitizing screen, or there is that window that's going to list all the objects on the right that you can individually click them.
Yeah. So, all right, Justin, let's pull up your screen.
I'm way behind because I was playing.
Well, yeah, that's how you learn, right?
Exactly. I was going through all the menus and whatnot.
Well, I did warn you earlier. I'm like, you should grab the PDF shortcut document.
Yes. So the one thing I did notice is the 3D rendering, like you were saying earlier. It seems like well, there's always the unwritten rule that if it looks correct on screen, it's not going to sew correctly. All the adjustments that you're making on screen is so when it does sew, it sews out correctly. You're making the compensation. I noticed this 3D rendering does look like it is very low density. It's representing, and I get it. It's trying to make it look like stitches. But like I know in Wilcom, if I were to go in there and add, a lot of density into this, like let's test it here. I'm going to put a density level that I would usually do for 3D Puff. Oh, that did jump. So,
yep. You zoom in and it's going to open back up.
I see. Yeah, so it's just a matter of this software's version of the 3D rendering, and again, unless you're jumping back and forth between different softwares, you're going to get used to whatever one that you're using constantly. So if this is the normal view, I'm sure if I use this on a daily basis, I would know that, okay, this view is not necessarily representing that I don't have enough density in it. That's just the way this software represents it.
Now you don't usually digitize with the True View on. You're usually into the wireframe mode, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So
is there a wireframe? Is there a wireframe option on this?
So cube on the upper top. Yep. Left. Other left. More cube. It's a cube.
It's a cube?
Yeah, cube. That one. You were just on it.
This one?
No, to the left. It's a cube. Like a dice. It looks like a dice.
This one looks like a dice. Oh, this one here?
To the left. Nope. Well, that essentially did it. That one. There you go.
That's the True View. I was wondering, there's like, in Wilcom, there's the wireframe where it only shows you, there you go.
Oh, yeah. You can
it only shows you the wireframe or the stitches. Okay.
The object that you're digitizing, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm with you.
So, yeah. There's the different views. But, yeah. The 3D view or the True View, I think that's a lot of times you're using to output samples to show people just a rendering. There is times where I might kind of zoom back out, hit the True View really quick just to kind of see where things are and the way things are meshing. A lot of times, sometimes too, when you're in this view and you're working fast, you really don't see stitch angles right off the bat. But as soon as you do the True View, you can really see if there's a stitch angle that's really off. It's just more of a visual thing, checking as I go. But yeah, I don't typically digitize in True View now.
So Cindy says, I like to practice my digitizing in True View. I guess it's okay. So I digitize in True View. I'm actually toggling it on and off constantly, which I think annoys people when they actually watch me do it because it's True View, not True View, True View, not True View.
There's times I do that as well. I mean, I'm hitting the hotkey. What is it? T for True View, and
that's text in Chroma.
Yeah. T for True View, S for Stitch View, or something like that.
Yep.
It's funny that I don't remember them, but if I'm working, my hands automatically go to them.
Yeah, I got a different keyboard. It's been a hot mess because the buttons are slightly differently placed, and
oh man,
I actually have to take a look. But all in all, it's plotting the stitches. They're coming around. The interface is not too bad. I know where things are. I mean, I know where things are. Justin, what do you think? What's your impression?
It's you know, I've used worse. Um, I think it's more the things that I'm not used to right now using this is just because I'm not using it on a daily basis, and I just a matter of have to acclimate myself of how you get to a running stitch, how you end your stitches, how you do the sequencing. It took me a little while to figure out sequencing.
Yeah.
Again, it's just there's different levels of software out there as far as costs. Different companies and different software developers have a little bit more in-depth things. When you know you get to in Brilliance, you may see functions in Brilliance that are nowhere found in any other software. I know they come out
Yep.
with some pretty neat stuff. Um, Again, I'm a Wilcom user, so of course I'm going to be a little bit more biased to Wilcom, but I think Wilcom is really, really strong on what they offer. And if you want to add elements on Wilcom, I know there is softwares that you can add on to the base
Yep.
digitizing software.
So I
Chrome,
believe that this is one that's a buy once, you're done.
that's what I was going to say. I know it has 3 levels as far as the digitizing levels, but there's no add-ons past that. Then
I think there is one for Sequins and Chenille, because I think it at one point, or I believe they still do have that functionality. So I think that they have those as add-ons as well. But we should have brought somebody from Ricoma on here, and they could have told us.
yeah.
Oh, but this is.
But overall, I mean, I used to use Wings before Wilcom for many years, and just the way this is set up and the way you plot points and stuff is really similar to Wings. So right off the bat, kind of going last night, I was going through the menus and kind of playing with the input functions, and there was a lot of similarities to those 2 softwares. So I'm sure if I went from Wings directly to this, there wouldn't be much changes to it.
Yeah. I know one of the things I find interesting in this software is you can actually set your push compensation. So not only do you have pull compensation, you can set your push compensation. And the push compensation is something that I struggled with, mainly because like on an O, it's circular, your 2 ends meet. When you add push compensation, it puts a gap in there. And so I don't often use that, but I don't think Wilcom doesn't have push compensation. It's just pull compensation, and you manually adjust for those.
Right, and Wings had push compensation too, and it properly did it as far as like it wouldn't mess with the ends of the O. But I noticed depending on like if you're doing a line of lettering, the calculations weren't as custom as I wanted. So it may do something that's an inch tall lettering next to something that's 5 millimeters tall. It wouldn't necessarily work depending on what size. So I didn't use that automatic function in Wings. So there's a lot of times where a lot of the automatic functions are a time saver, and it's something where you don't have to think about, kind of like the tie in and tie off after trims, after color changes, the distance, where to trim, all that in Wilcom is really, really nice. But there's times where using everything automatic may kind of work against you when you're trying to finesse certain areas of digitizing.
Right. Yeah, I can totally see that. I'm just going to keep letting you go. You're on it, right?
I'm on it. So
now, when you do an object and it finishes, do you set your start and stop point?
I kind of went through all my elements here.
Oh, Justin, there's another general option you need to change.
What's that?
So if you go into Tools and General Options, let me go up to the top, Tools, General Options, and then I want to say it's under the digitizing. If you set all of the the complex fill, the satin, and the run mode, if you set those to advanced, when you end the object, it's going to ask you to digitize your start point and then digitize your stop point.
Well, that makes sense.
So I like to have those in advance because then, like Wilcom does, you can do automatic closest join and it's just going to do it. But this, you're going to do your object and then you're going to hit enter and it's going to ask you where you want your start point.
Okay.
If you want it there, then yeah, you can just hit enter and then you do your stop point. So I like that.
It is nice.
I wish that.
That is one function in Wilcom that I don't like using is the automatic closest join.
Yep.
That does do some weird stuff sometimes where instead of, at the end of a satin stitch, the very end stitch, stop there and then join to the next object, it'll actually go back a few stitches. So I think that's just causing areas that you might add some short stitches that you can possibly start adding needle or thread breaks.
Yeah. And I do like this where you can actually at the end of the object you can say here and there. I really do like that feature because like you just said, I don't use the closest join in Wilcom either. I like to manually path everything. And sometimes after you do a circular object, you have to change your start and you have to go into node edit and change your start and your stop. Where this, you don't. Just when you're ending the object, you tell it start here, stop there. So
yeah, I'm starting to get the hang of it. I got settings, I got trims.
Yeah. You've got pathing.
You got pathing.
You change so that your right click does a curve node.
Yes, that was definitely. I see that it does have the two inputs. Of course, you have the point counterpoint that you can do a satin, or you have where you can go around one side
and then come back around.
And this is one thing I did notice that when you're using, I think it's called input B in Wilcom, is that correct? Right here, when you end a point in Wilcom, you'll actually come back to the starting end and work your way back around the same way. When this one, you actually come the reverse direction.
And see, I think I like the reverse direction better because it's just, I know it's not a lot of movement, but it's still movement.
Yes, I agree. I do like it reverse because, if you're digitizing something that's going across, especially when you're zoomed in and you're digitizing and you're panning, digitizing and panning, you end your input B, you got to go back to that beginning, start over. If you're on that window, you just drop down and go to the reverse and then you're just going to pan back. So that is a cool function that they do have in this.
So here's actually a really good question for you, Justin. Mark asks, so for all that pull comp percentage change you just made, Justin, what was the reasoning for that and thought process behind it?
The pull comp that I put in there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, I'm going by functionality of Wilcom. And actually that's more similar to Pulse. We actually have Pulse at the office too, even though I don't use it for digitizing.
So you have 3 softwares. No, 4. Let's say 4. You have 4, right?
Yeah, I have in Brilliance too. I just don't know how to use it.
We should do another live where you figure it out.
Yeah, we should. Last time it was pretty bad. I was completely lost. This again, between experience with Wings and Pulse and Wilcom, I see the similarities. I think if I were using this on a daily basis, the learning curve would probably be really, really easy to jump on and grasp this one quicker. Pull comp, when you're digitizing something, as far as full compensation, the width of this O, if I'm plotting points exactly on those lines, when it sews, it's gonna those satin stitches are gonna pull in. So instead of it being, say, 3 millimeters thick as far as the thickness of the letter itself, it may pull to 2.5. So you're going to have a lot more skinny letters than what you're trying to represent for your design. So you got to add that pull compensation. I just arbitrarily pick 10% because that's a lot of times I use that in Pulse. it may not necessarily translate well in this software. I would have to play with it more and kind of grasp on a normal, again, barring any special fabrics, barring any special applications. You kind of have those generic settings that are always in the back of your head. And when you know in Chroma that 10-15% is generally the amount that you need to compensate, then that's what you're going to use normally.
Yep. And if you go, and you don't have to, Justin, but in the general options, when you get into the style, that's what that is. If you change it to cap, it's going to change to the default settings in this software, your pull compensation, your density, your underlays. That's what that style does. And if I remember right, you can actually create your own style, so your own defaults to set things to. And then it's good to set that before you start digitizing.
So yeah, that's real similar. Again, taking it back to Wacom, that
I didn't realize you went into my screen. It's all on one.
Templates. You can set certain templates in Wacom, or you can use a template that's going to save all your settings that you normally do for hats or whatever, 3D puff or whatever it may be. There's actually shortcuts where you could actually program a certain stitch with a certain density, with a certain pull compensation, that you can set shortcuts with that. So the style, that's a lot of softwares may come in again with preset styles, but you got to remember there's so many factors that when you're digitizing, one size doesn't fit all. So you got to be careful with those set styles.
Yeah. I mean, there's you as you do it, you're going to start to learn. That's really the experience part of it, is the more you digitize and you sew out and you see what's happening and make adjustments to that, the longer you do that, the more that when, like for instance, if I said to Justin, I'm sewing on a dry fit polo, Justin's going to go, oh, in my experience on dry fit polos, it needs to be 0.17 to 0.2 pull comp. It needs to be a 0.38 density to 0.4 density. It needs a center run and a zigzag underlay, or whatever settings he's going to go through and say. And if I say, Justin, I'm going to sew this on a cap, he's going to say, all right, well, then I need to make those adjustments in all of the settings for that too. So
right. And that's where kind of like the general rule in my brain with my software, where I go to, that I know normally works. But there are times that if my customer's not specifically telling me that they're going to use 60 weight thread, well, if you don't tell me that, I don't know how to compensate in the file for that. Or, that's where when you start getting into these specialty fabrics, and I know polyester polos are something that everybody has problems with, you start getting into different stabilizers. You have fusible stabilizers. You have different hoops that the people are using. And there are times where, my settings, because they work for me 99% of the time, if it mixes the way that you're running it on your machine or the stabilizer you're using, there may be that time where they just don't jive together. And either I need to make an adjustment to the file, or you need to make an adjustment to the way you're running it. Whatever's best case scenario to get that design ran on that fabric the best you can.
Yeah. And when I started, I did patches. I mean, there wasn't anything else. I just did patches and that was it. And so I got down the settings that I used for patches because I did so many of them, and that is what I used all the time. So I kind of learned what worked for patches on the twill that I was using and the stabilizer that I was using. And when I went in to start to learn how to digitize for caps and other garments, I know caps, like you do a 0.4 density on a cap and it's going to look a little thin in there versus doing it on a polo, which is going to look okay. So, it's learning those adjustments as you're getting your experience. And I think that's one thing that frustrates a lot of people when they start, is they get their software like this, they pull it up, they digitize it in auto or manual fashion, and then they start, it kind of turns into a guessing game on settings, because they haven't done the experience and they don't want to ruin. I know when I started, I if I had one hat to do, I'd order one hat. I'd never embroidered a hat before, but I was going to embroider hats, so I ordered one hat or one shirt, or because it's just work, right? You don't ever screw anything up ever.
No, never.
Yeah. See, so it's getting to that point that you're like, oh, you know what, I'm going to mess up a couple, and becoming okay with that. I know that was something that I struggled with. I was like, you know what, I can't mess this up because I only bought one. I'm not supposed to mess it up. It's not common for people to mess it up. Everybody always posts all their perfect pictures, but like I order what, 10% over. Maybe I'm more like 3 or 4% over. let me say that. I got to a point that I was ordering like 10% extra. I buy 50 hats, I order an extra 5, and the 5 were my screw ups.
We have contract work customers, and in our contract price list, we have a spoilage, because we know that especially when it comes to t-shirts. I know when we place an order for t-shirts, there's always going to be 2 or 3 more t-shirts than we need. Just to make sure that especially if it's a garment that we're not too familiar with, we're going to want to test print on the actual fabric. If it's a tri-blend or something like that, that's easy to get a scorch. In embroidery, we explain to contract customers, you're dealing with a machine that's shoving needles through a fabric. Things go wrong. So you need to know there is a percentage, that there's allowable spoilage. So yeah, it happens.
Yeah, it's just when you're new, you don't think that happens. And then that's all that happens. You go to put your one shirt on and you ruin it, and you order another shirt, and you put it on and you ruin it too, and you order another shirt. 5 shirts later, you're like, why can't I get this? But that's
we had a running joke that anytime we were trying to do something personal for ourselves, we always screw it up.
That I
every single time. We can run a 1,000-piece order with every single one perfectly good, and we go throw one shirt or one hat on the machine. Oh, I'm going to do something for myself, and something happens.
Yep. That's when you run out of bobbin, or you hit a hoop, or it birds nests and tears a hole in the garment, or there's so many. We could go on for days.
Exactly.
But let me ask you this, Justin. From your, what do you say, like 2 hours of looking at this software, maybe an hour? We've been here for an hour. So your hour and 30 minutes, because you were looking at some of the menus earlier. What are some of the likes you have about the software? What are some of the things you like about it?
I think the input levels, as far as the choosing what stitch types and as far as inputs of how you input a satin and the different variations that you have, I think I like that a lot. There has definitely been some softwares when I jump on, like when I first jumped on the Pulse, I found it real confusing on how they had it set up and how you did. And again, you got to remember, every single software is going to do the exact same thing. You're plotting stitches. You're plotting a straight stitch. It's just how it groups it together into a satin stitch, into a running stitch, into a fill stitch. But the overall interface, I think, with this is pretty self-explanatory. It's nice and clean. I think you got your tools on the left-hand side here. You have your views on top. You have your functions and your settings, as well as your view over here. I'm sitting here pointing at all this, and I don't even have it shared on the screen.
I know. But I was like, here, let me bring your screen up. There you go.
So yeah, so I was saying you have your tools on the left-hand side that are pretty concise. You have your views, your different views of how you see your stitches, outlines, whatnot. I think you can hide your backdrop. Yeah, you can hide your backdrop there. All your settings are to your right. So the overall layout, I think, is good. I think it's once you start getting into the pattern of your workflow and how you're digitizing, your tools on your left, you grab your tools, you digitize, you need to change settings, it's on your right. I know in Wacom, you can pretty much grab everything and move it all around if you want. I suggest that once you feel comfortable in a certain layout, you stick to it, and that way it's kind of second nature that that if you need to change density, it's up to your right.
Yeah.
It just helps your workflow, and you're not sitting there searching, oh, where did I put that? Where did I put that?
Yep. All right. So what are things that you dislike about the software?
I noticed the start and end points are only on the outer edges.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I like hiding tie-ins in the center of satins, so that could be underneath.
Nope.
I don't like that. I don't like that you can't do a setting on one object and kind of set it to that's where you want your density and underlay and everything to be for everything else that'll be digitized afterwards. Kind of universal setting. I don't like that. And again, if Chroma users out there, if there is settings that I just didn't see in the hour and a half that I used it that do these functions, I do apologize. I'm just, like you said, first inclination of using it. Those are the type of things that I didn't like too much. Sequencing's a little bit kind of wonky. Wacom, you can sequence things a lot easier and in different ways. You can sequence by color, you can sequence by selects, you can sequence by different options. But again, overall, I think if I had to use this, I could probably get used to it in about a day.
Yeah, I think you can get pretty quick to it about a day. And some of the things that I like about it, I like being able to digitize the start and stop point at the end of the object. I think that's really I like their input B with the column B.
Yes.
I like how they do that. Like you said, it's really clean. I like being able to right click on the ruler and change it from English to metric. That's really handy to not have to look for the little drop down window anywhere. I can just right click on there. Some of the things I'd like to see, is I don't like the tie-ins on the edges of letters. I'll do even if you do a run, when it goes to do the underlay, jump one stitch out to the outside edge and then drop back in and run in.
Oh wow.
That's one thing that I don't like, because by the time you travel back, that could have just moved a little bit. Now you've got one stitch that sticks out. But that I do wish. I'm a big, I like the full heads up cockpit display. Like I'm flying at 7,000 feet. I like to see everything on one screen. So having some of these sub menus for me is a little frustrating, but it's not anything I can't learn to work around. So all in all, and another thing for it is that it runs natively on a Mac. So I know you don't have to install Parallels.
That is nice.
I do like how I like how quick it opens, and I like how it's just pretty responsive software. So I do like that. Some of the the other things,
the weird trim on the object instead of before it. That's kind of odd to me.
And see, when you click on that weird trim in the object before it, when you do that on the little scissors, that's when it applies. But if you go to the actual drop down menu, it puts the trim at the end of the object, so it's not consistent.
Oh, yeah, that would be confusing.
And so that's another thing that's a little frustrating. That and the manual is not. I think it's only like 25 pages. It might be a little bit longer than 25 pages, but
that's one thing that you would hope from the software is consistency from a function that you're grabbing from a menu that's in your cockpit, a function that you're choosing from the menu and finding in from a drop-down menu to the hotkey. You hope that they're all going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
In the same way.
Like I'm in the manual right now because I opened it because I did that. And the manual doesn't even have the keyboard shortcuts in it. And it didn't when they initially released the software. And that's actually the chart that I have that we made for the Embroidery Nerd. That was literally me sitting here pushing every button on my keyboard to see what it did.
Figuring out what it did.
To figure out what it did. And then we made a keyboard shortcut for it. And then it's also for, we had somebody that was a Mac user that did the keyboard shortcuts for the Mac. So you can download those and have a nice reference sheet. But that's something that you would expect to see, from a software. The manual's 51 pages. I'd expect it to be a little bit longer than 51 pages. And, it should have the keyboard shortcuts in there. And but all in all, it's something that I could sit down and digitize a design in. you're able to move fairly well. It's pretty self-explanatory interface, so you can pick the things that you're trying to do. So those are the things that I look at. But we've got Suzanne saying that the pat pops off earlier. Cindy says my problem is I usually don't have an issue with my contract orders, but then I do my own customers and I mess up one and no extras. It's always if you don't order an extra one, it's not going to work. We're gonna put that out. But Cindy, that's funny. We're all sitting in the planes talking. Yeah, and I'm not going to say that name because I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm just going to apologize for not saying the name, but thanks for creating the shortcut chart. Yeah, so those are the things that I'd hope to see in the future. Is I'd like to see them expand a little bit on their manual, add in all the keyboard shortcuts because I'm sure there may be some that I've missed. Because it's those things that, like, when you ask a question, generally people are like, go look in the user manual. if it's not the user manual or it's not an extensive user manual, then too much data is the same as not enough. It can be underwhelming and overwhelming.
So if you're new to any software, whether you're new to the industry or just new to the software, what I would suggest is kind of go through and like Mark was asking, as far as the pull compensation, I would go through and sew things out, different levels of densities, different pull compensations. Something Eric Campbell shared a long time ago was he basically took a square, a fill square, like a 1 inch or a 2 inch by 2 inch square.
Yep.
You sew out on a piece of fabric on light thread on darks, dark thread on lights. Different densities, different underlays, and you can reference them. I have one here actually.
Yeah,
a thick stack somewhere.
You swatch it.
Yeah,
you make swatches.
And not only are you going to start learning your machine and what works best as far as different fabrics, different colors and stuff, but then you're also going to learn what the software does and how it translates into your embroidery. Because there is those little quirks that depending on how density levels are input. As far as the numerical value, as far as pull comp, sometimes they use exact values, sometimes they use percentages. But you can get a nice visual on what it means when you're doing something in your software and how it translates to your embroidery. So that's not only is it good to just sample on your embroidery machines, but like I said, it's going to make you learn a little bit more on what the functions do in your software.
All right. Well, Justin, we went through the hour pretty quick.
Yeah.
So
I guess Chrome was pretty fun.
Yeah, there you go. We spent some time in it, and we both digitized 4 letters. Feeling pretty good about that.
Only took us an hour.
Yeah, but it's not the software that we use every day, and inputs can go. But I think that it's as far as software goes, it's fairly, the user interface is really straightforward. I think it's anybody be able to pick it up pretty quick. At least how to input things and change things. So I think there's that, and then learning. There's learning to plot points, and then there's learning the rest of it. And plotting points, I think, is pretty easy to get in there, but then all the rest of it is definitely going to be swatch testing and experience. You might ask somebody, "Hey, what settings do I use?" But that, if they're in a different software, the answer might be slightly different because it depends on. I think a lot of it depends on the stitch filter that it runs through at the end. And how that's calculating things, and how much that's going to eventually change things as it sews out. But that's, I think, everything we had. We'll have to jump in it again some other time.
We shall.
All right. So anything else you want to add, Justin?
No, I think if you ordered your embroidery nerd shirts, they will be shipping tomorrow. We finally got everything in and printed, so those will be shipping, so look out for those. And I think that's it. I mean, we have Applique Getaway that we're going to be at in July. So if anybody's going to that, we look forward to meeting you.
Yeah, we'll all be there, me, Matt, and Justin, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
something will transpire. You can't put us three together and not have something go wrong. But that's pretty much everything I've got. So with that, that's Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios and 3dpuffprotools.com. Tools.com?
3dpuffTools.com.
Tools.com. And I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works, and we're both here representing the Embroidery Nerd. And we'd like to thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Night, guys.